Welcome to the Eye of the Observer podcast, a podcast of the Observer news staff. I'm your host, Vansh,
Joined by Eric.
and I'm also joined by Evan, where today we're going to be talking about his future human interest story on Walkable Cities. Let's dive right in.
So, Evan, you and I are currently working on a story on what Walkable Cities in Fargo. So, I just want to know. Obviously, you're the main writer because you pitched it to me. I was wondering, like, what's the process? How far have you gotten into it?
I went to Fargo, as you know, several weeks ago, and I took some pictures, checked out the city, and then I've also scheduled 2 interviews. As you know, I was supposed to interview an urban planner while I was there. We still have 2 interviews going on, and then I'm also working on gathering the sources, and then I've also worked on organizing a trip to Elgin where we can measure the sidewalks, the distance between trees, parking, and do some studies.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I'm like sure there's like different walkable cities around the United States, but why Fargo specifically?
Also, where is Fargo for people who don't know where it is?
Yeah, so I'll answer both of your questions. I'll kind of sum it up into what is Fargo, North Dakota, and why it's so special. So Fargo, North Dakota is south of Grand Forks, and it's a little bit outside Minnesota. It's really far north. Actually, when I went up there, they were getting a ton of snow. And so what makes Fargo so special is that Fargo in the past couple of years, especially in the last decade, has been working towards a more walkable city. So they've been expanding their sidewalks, really working on their downtown. So Fargo is special in that case because their downtown, unlike most American cities, is not decrepit, not filled with buildings from the 20s and 30s, but filled with buildings from now and from back then, and also filled with a ton of people. So it has a very vibrant and vivacious downtown that most American cities don't have.
Now, I know you described Fargo as a walkable city, but some people think about car-centric cities and how that's kind of better and more practical, such as Chicago, where you can go places without a car because of parking and everything, but compare that to, let's just say, a suburban city or whatnot. And my question to you is, why are car-centric cities bad?
Yeah, so there are a ton of arguments as to why car-centric cities are bad. I mean, so I'll explain like this. So in the 1920s, 30s, 40s, and anyone before the 1950s, before World War II, how our cities were designed were very much like walkability. It was designed where the jobs were more in the city centers and the housing was kind of next to the jobs because you could only walk there or you could take a horse. But with the birth of the automobile and then interstates coming in, a lot of people started moving out. And so that led to something called suburban sprawl. So suburban sprawl follows this thing called Euclidean zoning. And Euclidean zoning is like, it's the separation of landscape into large areas of single use. So I don't know if you guys have noticed in the local Elgin area or even around the suburbs of Chicago, right? You have an industrial park. You have a place where you shop, perhaps Algonquin Commons, Randall Road, Spring Hill Mall. You have a place where you work, which are usually the downtowns, or it could be like Schaumburg Corporate Center, where all the office buildings are. And you have places where you live, which are suburbs. Suburban sprawl, there's a multitude of reasons. So one of the biggest things is how very unwalkable it is and how bad it is for your health. So according to the CDC, in the 1970s, only like 10% of Americans are obese. Today, that's roughly 41.9%. And then when you look at kids, I mean, childhood obesity is 19.7%, or roughly affecting 14.7 million children. So a big part of that, and if you're wondering about obesity, is because if you live in a suburban house, right, what most people live in, do you walk to the grocery store? Do you walk to school?
Now that you
No,
mention it,
not
I can't.
anymore,
Exactly.
no.
I cannot.
It's crazy, right? And then when you look at countries like England, Japan, France, these are first world countries. These are places where the obesity rate is very low. They all walk to school. They walk to go to the grocery store. And probably one of the biggest indicators is hanging out, right? Where do most people hang out in America? Video games, online, playing Fortnite, playing PUBG, right?
They're always so
Playing
like,
Rocket
Call
League.
of Duty.
Call of
what?
Duty,
Right,
yes,
they're always
let's
stuck in their house.
go.
They're no longer
Yeah,
outside,
right.
right?
Valorant. The saddest thing ever is that in most cities, people will come together to hang out, right? And to do that here as a kid, you can't drive. You have to wait until your parents get home from work to drive
Yeah.
you to a place. One of the saddest things, you can't even enjoy nature. You can't just go and walk to a park. For most people in Europe, you can. For most people in Asia, you can't. In the America, you have to drive. I have to drive 10 minutes to go enjoy some nature. It's crazy.
See, for me, my nearest park from my house, and I'm not in Elgin, I'm based in Bartlett. It's a 20-minute walk to the nearest park, both
Wow.
ways.
That's crazy.
So when I used to like when I had a bike, it was easier, but it was a lot of uphill, downhill. It was really
Yeah.
excruciatingly tired. Um, but it was simpler just to go to the nearest like what gas station, Seven
Yeah.
Eleven, Dunkin'
Yeah.
Donuts or whatever. Even though it was a little far, it was just way better than going to a park.
Yeah.
You
And
know,
I think that kind of ties in with your obesity statistics, where a lot of kids nowadays they don't go to parks just to hang out or to play games or whatever. They go to meeting spots like where there's food, like Dunkin' Donuts, gas stations, whatever, and then they go walk to a park. Well, in that time, they're not actually at the park to enjoy the nature. They're just there to enjoy, time with their friends. And not only that, but on college specifically, you can literally just come on to the college campus and enjoy time as well.
Adding on to what you say, a lot of Americans can agree that college is possibly the best time of their life. A large part of that is because it's on a walkable campus,
it is.
right? You notice when you go to college, like for example, the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign or the University of Wisconsin-Madison, you're walking outside and it's so lively, it's so vibrant. These type of street designs, it kindles connections and it allows you to meet people just all over the place. For example, in a lot of universities, there's the main quad, and walking out there and seeing all the different people out there, it really makes you
More happy.
more happy.
Yeah.
You enjoy the place more. It makes it really feel lively.
And I can
It
see
makes you
that.
feel involved as well.
Like I'm always walking around campus all the time, whether with Vansh or you.
Yeah.
I'm always talking, I'm always talkative. I'm always just walking around. I do feel happier when I'm up and moving than sitting down and playing video games and
Yep.
hunchbacked with the headsets on, looking at a screen.
Now, I mean, if you work a good amount of time like how I do or whatever, like video games sound like an amazing option. But socially, like hanging out on campus
It's
is one of the
needed.
easiest and best things you can do, especially with
Correct. Yep.
midterms times and right now spring break's coming up.
Yep.
Or by this time when the episode does get published, spring break's past, but
Yep.
it's still midterms times for
Yeah.
some people.
Yeah.
And just hanging out with friends makes it a little better. Makes like you can actually tolerate
It's stress
it.
relief, dude. That's what
It
it
is
is.
stress relief.
It's
But
a
also,
feeling.
in those spaces, walkable places, you're more likely to make friends. You're more likely to find people. You're more likely to see people that you know. And you're also more likely to find maybe a romantic partner. So,
Romantic partner.
Are you sure about that? What are you
Yeah,
gonna hit us with this?
because
this isn't.
no, I'm trying to say, like, if you live in, like, for example, like, even ECC, it's a very suburban campus,
Mhm.
right? You're just a lot of people just drive here, park in the parking lot, take that 1-2 minute walk into the building, go to their class, come back out and leave,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And versus a campus like the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, everyone's staying there. It's a lot of residential housing there, so a lot of people are there all day. So you'll find people at bars, perhaps parks. There's so many opportunities to meet new people.
It's very lively.
yeah.
In a way,
Versus Elgin, ECC, not as much.
It's not really.
Yeah,
people are
and
going
I
to
mean,
class, they leave.
but you're comparing that as well. But I have experience with UIC as well. It's more in the city,
Yeah.
based in the city. So you can always find something to do. Since it's in
Yeah.
the heart of Chicago, and it's in
Yeah.
some colleges are in the medical district. You can still literally go out. You can go to Soldier Field if you like and tour there or do whatever you want. Go to by the lakeside, and if you just want to go for a quick cold plunge, because the water temperature is terrible. It's like,
Right. No, hold on.
Yeah.
To what you're saying, like essentially socializing makes you a happier person. What about like people who are just social anxiety? Like
Yeah, so there are a lot of ways. So people that are socially anxious may not get behind the walkable city, but it is very good for your health. I'll bring up statistics. So a lot of people do not understand how much inactivity factors into your weight. So American obesity is largely, a lot of people think it's just because of diet, right? We had Michelle Obama who tried to change school lunches, right? We've had a lot of diet programs, but inactivity is probably the biggest factor when it comes to whether or not you're going to be obese. There was a study done by Dr. James Levine at Mayo Clinic, and what he did was he put subjects, he gave them electronic underwear. Now, he gave all of them the same diet, right? But some people gained weight and some people didn't. The factor that they found was how much the subjects were moving. So those who gained weight were sitting 2 hours more per day than those that did not gain weight.
oh my gosh.
Another thing I'd like to bring up is asthma, right? Asthma is very prevalent in this country.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you guys know kids who have asthma, right? I know several.
Yeah.
I know several friends who have asthma. So every day, roughly 10 American children die from asthma. 10.
Wow.
Asthma is 3 times more prevalent today than it was in the 1990s. And a large part of that is because of car exhaust fumes. Because where are schools located? right? They're located with parking lots surrounding them. When you walk outside and you get done with school, you're walking where there's a ton of car exhaust fumes coming on. Everyone's starting their car in high school. Everyone's turning on their cars. You got car exhaust fumes coming. You got the bus. But this also leads to why there's so many pedestrian-related accident deaths. Because you have juniors and seniors in high school who may not have the best driving experience, and they're already starting to drive. And who are they carpooling with? Well, they have to pick up the freshmen and sophomores, right? They're the ones that are getting the rides from the juniors and seniors. And so when you have a ton of adolescents in the same car, that leads to catastrophe, and that's why so many Americans die a year. I mean, in the U.S., roughly 20 people a day die from pedestrian-related deaths. If you look at it, the rate for U.S. car accidents deaths is 30.8 per 100,000 people. In France, that's 3.9 per 100,000 people. So 3.9 versus 30.8. That's 4 to 30.8. The U.S. is way higher. In Japan, it's 2.24. A lot of people will argue that maybe France, it's better set up, the laws are better. No, if you look at it in the U.S., Portland, Oregon, which is a city that has been working to make a walkable city, they only have 3 accident-related deaths per 100,000 people per year, versus Orlando has it at 20 per 100,000.
How has Fargo changed, like, to become a walkable city? What did they do?
Yeah, well, Fargo has been very impressive because they actually started a 39-block Renaissance zone. They really started kicking this off in 2014, where they added like $100 million in public and private investment. So since 2016, they've actually added 1,000 apartments. They're planning to add 600 more in 2 years. And they've upped their residents from just 1.2 thousand in the 90s to 5,000 people living in their town.
Wow, that's a big increase in terms of exponential population growth. But steering away from Fargo, right? We've been talking about North Dakota for a while now.
What about Elgin?
What about Elgin? How can we
Where
apply
ECC
this?
is located at, where I'm located at.
So what Fargo did was they really focused on bringing people to the downtown area. And not just, most downtowns, they just have like, entertainment, like maybe a downtown theater and a couple restaurants and bars.
Right.
Yeah.
They really focused on bringing housing to the downtown area.
Like force them to move in there, essentially?
Yeah, just
Yeah?
force it. Yeah.
Okay.
So they have this thing called mixed use development. I don't know if you guys have heard of it, mixed use development. Well, mixed use development is where you have, you might have retail on the first floor and then you'll have residential on the next second, third, fourth, fifth floor. Because what happens is you create a downtown that's lively, from 6 a.m. in the morning eating breakfast all the way to the very end at nightlife. And then you have people you don't just have a downtown that's active during the weekdays because people are working there, but you have a downtown that's active during the weekends because people are out and about. It's like a little neighborhood. So instead of making a downtown a place where a bunch of office buildings are, you make it a neighborhood. And so that's what Elgin can do. Elgin can really work on adding more housing in those old buildings, revitalizing it. But they can also work on making the streets a little smaller and expanding the sidewalks, maybe getting bicycle lanes and adding more trees.
With Fargo being a walkable city, like, is it more dangerous? Like, do you get what I'm saying? Like, walking at night, is it more dangerous or no?
So crazy enough, it's been found by numerous studies that if you make a more walkable city, it actually gets less dangerous for pedestrians. Because what's happening with Fargo is they're making the downtown focused on pedestrians. So instead of the downtown being convenient for cars, it's convenient for pedestrians. So when I went to downtown Fargo, they expanded the sidewalks, so it's really wide sidewalks. And then they put echelon or angle parking spaced between the sidewalk and the road. And so what this does is this protects the pedestrians there's a parking barrier that protects the pedestrians. So no car is going to like turn onto the sidewalk. Or even if they do, they're going to hit a car. They're not going to hit pedestrians. And the other thing they did is they turned like 6-lane or 4-lane roads into 2-lane roads. And they got rid of one-way roads altogether, which just makes things a lot safer.
Yeah, like over there in San Francisco, there's always just one-way roads. And it's confusing too, and it can be dangerous as well, especially if you enjoy walking downtown. Not
It's
downtown, but in the
confusing.
city. Yeah, right. It's confusing too. It's confusing too.
A great example is in Elgin. I don't know if you guys have been in downtown Elgin, but downtown Elgin, they have several one-way roads, and they're very I actually was going the opposite direction on a one-way road not too long ago.
Right.
So, yeah.
No, I can see that because I was in Elgin like not too long ago downtown.
Yeah.
And I was just complaining how there's one-way roads there as well because I hated it in San Francisco. I was like, what? I hate this. It's too confusing. I don't like it. But it can be very dangerous, unfortunately.
It really can.
In Chicago, I was driving one time. I went to go visit my mom at work, and I accidentally turned on a one-way road, and a cop pulled me over. And he was like, "Oh, have you driven in a city before? And I was like, heck no.
No.
And he's like, oh, there's a one-way road. And by the time, like, I didn't know what a one-way road was. And drivers said they don't teach you what one-way
No,
roads in
right,
cities
right.
are. They only
Mhm.
teach you residential driving, etc.
Yeah.
So when you go to cities, really, I think it's just you gotta assume. You gotta turn on the navigation, and sometimes you don't even get service. Like when we were in San Francisco,
Oh yeah.
that was terrible.
Yeah, in Chicago
Yeah.
they be doing that a lot. You're under a highway or under a bridge.
You know, we more like we talked about walkable cities, safety, and the reason why. I guess we went to drunk driving as well. Why now? Why are we focused? Why are you focusing on this now?
How'd you get into it?
I, over the pandemic, would look on Google Earth for like an hour a day. It was just something to pass time. You know, some people spend their time looking at TikToks. I spend my time looking at Google Earth.
I mean, playing video games. For
Playing
me,
video
really.
games too, as well, Rocket League. And so I used to be able to like know cities just based off of their street grids. It's like San Francisco street grid, Sioux City street grid. And then I started looking towards Skyline, and I started memorizing Skylines. So I know Skylines all the way from Allentown, Pennsylvania, to Cedar Rapids, to Grand Rapids, all the way up to New York City. And so from there, I started looking at what makes a downtown lively. Because I noticed some skylines are a lot bigger than other skylines, even though they may have the same population. Like, for example, El Paso, Texas has like nearly 1 million people, but their skyline is absolutely small compared to like a city like Boston or Baltimore. So that's how I got into it. And then I started looking at like what makes downtown downtown's lively, and that's how I fell upon Fargo.
Well, was Fargo a personal choice, or did you just choose it strictly on the walkable aspect of it?
Yeah, so there are many cities that are currently working towards like what Fargo did. One of the first cities to do it was Grand Rapids, Michigan. They
Mhm.
really worked on revitalizing their downtown.
Mhm.
Chicago's also pretty good. Seattle has been working a lot, but the biggest city for me was Portland. Portland, they're like the only city that was working towards a more walkable city, while all the other cities were working towards a more car-centric city.
Mm-hmm.
So Portland, I don't know if you guys know this, but Portland actually has the most number of independent bookstores per capita.
Oh, really?
Yeah. They also have the most number of independent strip clubs per capita.
I mean, fun fact, eh?
That's a fun fact. So Portland, so I mentioned that because Portland really cares about local businesses. And so when they really focus on pedestrian-centric cities, small businesses flourish.
Right.
So I looked into that, and that's when I fell upon Grand Rapids. And then I was scrolling through Google Earth, and I saw Fargo. And then later that week, I saw an article on Fargo's small businesses and how they're flourishing.
So it's like Fargo, like the best walkable city we have in the United States, or
It is by far not the best. I think Portland, New York City, you could argue even Chicago, San Francisco. Now, these are more about public transportation, Washington, D.C. too. But Fargo really surprised me because they're so far up north. They're such a cold climate, right? No one wants to be out when it's like -2 degrees, but somehow they've managed to get the people behind that. And also Fargo is like a pretty Republican, pretty conservative red state. It's in a red state, North Dakota, versus Portland is in Oregon, very blue state. And obviously this has very much used to be associated with like liberal, but this is now like a bipartisan thing that everyone can agree on. So it really astounded me that Fargo was really able to get their voters in on something like this. And also the fact that they've done so much in the last 10 years. That's why I went to Fargo.
this? You say you're part of a club, I guess, an organization.
Yeah, so I used to watch Not Just Bikes. If anyone's listening, Not Just Bikes is a YouTube channel that's really interesting. They talk about new urbanism, which is the movement, which is essentially just making pedestrian-focused cities. And I'm actually part of an organization called Strong Towns. Strong Towns is an organization that gives everyone the resources to, go to a city board meeting, a town hall meeting, and try and advocate, push for laws, developments that will work on bettering the infrastructure for pedestrians.
Do they have any social medias that you'd like to put out here or anything like
Yeah,
that,
so-
like a website or whatever?
So if anyone's listening, there's a Strong Towns Instagram. There's actually a Strong Towns Chicago. You can follow that. There is a Strong Towns YouTube channel that recently just started making like really good YouTube videos. They actually talk about parking minimums as their first video. And so you can follow their YouTube channel. You can look up Strong Towns on Google. You can go follow them. And you can pay the subscription and start supporting what is essentially a new urbanism movement.
So with you talking about Fargo and the story that you're writing, are you hoping to make a change or anything, something similar to that?
100%. 100%. I'm as you know, pretty passionate about this topic, but I'm really hoping that cities around the Illinois Chicagoland area can work to make more pedestrian focused cities. Personally, my city, Algonquin, just revitalized their downtown. So they had like your typical downtown with like, big wide streets with like very tiny sidewalks, but they actually implemented really wide sidewalks, added trees, added echelon angle parking. And so if more cities can do that, more suburb cities can do that, the better it is, the more lively our downtowns, but also the safer our children are, the better the health of our population. I mean, the less prevalence of asthma, the better it is for our environment. So 100%. I'm hoping that people get on this train.
So onto the I think we have to cut it. I think it's like the final question, but onto it. As Vansh mentioned at the very start, he was a human interest story. All right, cut this out.
Do you want to talk about what are the 4 things needed for a walkable city?
Right. Actually, I was gonna ask, but I have no idea how to implement it. How can I?
I think we need to do this stuff.
Well, I already asked you
downtowns
1,
one.
2, or the downtowns. I already asked
okay,
you
yeah,
Fargo.
Fargo. I think
Okay.
You
just
already
the
asked the
things.
4 things.
Wait, we did.
No,
No,
I
you
didn't-
haven't explained them,
mention
or I
that.
haven't asked them. That's the next question.
Okay.
Okay. Also, but before we get started, again, human interest story. When can we expect the episode to come out? The article.
We're gonna have 2 more questions then. Never mind. We're gonna be
so I have
like,
a
so you've been talking about walkable cities, but what's the 4 things needed for it? And then we're gonna go into that.
So guys, this is the 4 things right here. So just make sure I cover all 4 things.
Cool.
How can
And if I don't, you can ask me, so how can walks be interesting? How can walks become
Yeah. Okay. So do you want me to introduce the walkable city thing? You can do the when should it come out, and then I'll do the outro. And I'm gonna cut
You
out.
should ask that because he and I are working on it. So if me asking, it's gonna sounds pretty stupid.
Yeah.
It's okay. Go
You
for
know
it.
what I'm saying?
This is for the listeners, so go for it. And then the other thing is, you're not gonna do this. I'm just gonna.
Once again, I'm Vansh Patel. Just like that.
Do you want to say that? Do you want to say it? I'm Eric Ringo. Bye. Or do you want me to just wrap
Just
it up?
end it up.
All right, cool.
Okay, cool. Take 2. 1, 2, 3, and action.
And Evan, you talked about walkable cities, but what makes a city so walkable? What are some things that we
That's
can
needed.
do?
Right.
Yeah, there's this guy named Jeff Speck, and he actually writes a very famous book about walkable cities, and he's actually one of the leading guys in new urbanism. He's not the founder, there's 2 other people, but he lists 4 things that make for a walkable city. So just to clear it up before I say those 4 things, the walkable city is defined as a car that is an optional instrument of freedom rather than a prosthetic device. You see, in our car-centric cities, the car is almost a prosthetic device. I mean, if you want to go shopping, you need a car, essentially. Unless you want to walk in, Randall Road. No one's going to walk in Randall Road unless they're
to.
that desperate. Yes,
Right.
especially in the winter.
Like you just need to have a car
Onto Randall
heater.
Road, just kind of
Yeah.
subject. 2 twins got ran over, and one of them died on Randall Road. I believe it was on Randall Road. I remember this happened back then when I was I think 12, 13.
Yeah.
I was still living in Elgin at that before I moved to Addison.
I mean, you drive on Randall Road and you see crosses, and that's exactly why. Car
Right, and
accidents.
on Randall Road, you see so many people just go too fast. It's you see people go too fast. And it's very dangerous too. They don't follow speed limit. It's just a horrible thing. Really.
It's Randall Road. I don't
It's
think
Randall
you could follow the speed limit if you tried. 'Cause you have to keep up with the flow of traffic. But back to the main question at hand.
Yeah, so the 4 things.
What's the 4 things needed for a walkable city?
Yeah, so I'll just go one by one, but the 4 things are that you need to have a proper, useful reason to walk. You need to have a walk that feels safe and where you can be safe. And then you need a walk that has to be comfortable. And the 4th thing, a walk that has to be interesting.
So if
So-
a city has all 4 of these, for example, if they have all 4 of these, they're considered a walkable city.
Yeah, so I'll go down the 4 and I'll explain. So the first one I'd like to talk about is a walk that feels safe and be safe. So one of the factors about a walk, so the first reason, a proper and useful reason to walk. So the first thing is walks need to be useful and they need to have a purpose. Right now, if you want to go for a walk, you're just walking around for your own pleasure, for your own excitement, to enjoy nature. But in other countries, walks should be there, to go grocery shopping, to go to the library, to go to school. So how can we make our downtowns have useful walks? So downtowns, they have office, they have entertainment, they have churches, worship, and they have a ton of parking. But if our downtowns can get, retail, so like dining, bookstores, cafes, like a Starbucks, well, not a Starbucks, but a local bookstore, local cafe, if they can get dining, if they can get housing, schools and recreation. Downtown movie theaters are really cool. You also have maybe if you get like a downtown axe throwing place. There's a downtown axe throwing place in East Dundee that just opened up. That's pretty cool.
Oh.
But you can get cool stuff. And so when you add housing, that should be the first thing you add, because that's the first step in making a good neighborhood. And then once you add housing, you add retail and dining on the first floor to make it lively, right? Especially with outdoor seating, that makes it good. And so when you add housing first, schools will come the last, because the people that live in those housing are usually like millennials, people who are more willing to take risks. And then as they grow older, they get families. That's when schools start to come. So the second factor for a good walkable city is a walk that feels safe. So one of the things you can do is add parking and expand the sidewalks, so it gives like a barrier. And you can also add a bike lane. Having narrower streets and making maybe the sidewalks elevated, these are great things, because if you make the car feel like they have to slow down, then that's like the perfect thing, and that's the safest thing for a pedestrian. And then the third factor is a comfortable walk. So a lot of cities in Europe, they have a nice ratio of height to the person. So like usually buildings in Europe, they're like 4, 5, 6, 7 stories. Fargo is going and adding a ton of canopy. So in the summer, it's very shady. The downtown walk is not exhausting. You're not being beat down by the sun. And then the last thing is an interesting walk. So you want to see signs of life. So during the pandemic, they actually closed a lot of streets and they allowed a lot of outdoor seating. That is perfect for walkable cities. So when you get outdoor seatings, it shows signs of life. When you see people outside, it just boosts your energy. It makes you happy. And so we are all social primates. We're all social beings. And so giving that interesting walk is essential.
Going back to what Vansh said earlier in the episode, we mentioned that this is a human interest article that's in the works. When could our listeners expect this to be published?
Yeah, possibly by the end of the semester. I mean, at the latest, early May, but hopefully before early May.
And do you have any final words to say?
Yeah, so when it comes to infrastructure, when it comes to making a walkable city, I would just like to bring up a quote from Kevin Costner in the classic film, The Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will come.
Thank you very much, Evan, for that. And thank you for attending today, on this podcast recording, and your story as well for Fargo. Thank you to our listeners as well, and a special thanks to our audio editor, Indy. And to learn more about The Observer and to see our work, visit elginobserver.com. And make sure to follow us on Instagram at Observer Newspaper and on TikTok. Until next time, my name is Vanch. I'm joined by Eric, and we'll see you guys next time.